Hello everyone and welcome to episode 2 of Jingle All the Way with Jules. Today we're going to be making some sumptuous starters to start your Christmas feast with a bang. First up we're going to do a pork and duck terrine, and then we'll do some delicious creamy goat's cheese and pear parcels for the vegetarians in the family. So getting straight into it with our terrine, some lovely festive flavours going in. We've got orange peel, a couple of cloves, some peppercorns and some coriander seeds. Now a terrine is fantastic for using up any bits of meat you've got kicking around the fridge at this time of year, which I always find I've got plenty of offcuts, whether it is giblets from your turkey or some offcuts from your gammon. Whatever it is, it can go into a terrine and be beautiful, spread on some crusty sourdough with some caramelized onion chutney. Okay, so we're going to blitz this up for 15 seconds. Maybe 5, and gradually whacking that up to speed. And then we're going to transfer our spice blend to a little bowl. Now I've got all of my meat prepped up for this terrine, but for those of you starting from scratch at home, the first thing you really want to do is get your duck prepped. So get your 2 duck breasts and take the skin off, but don't throw it away. Put those onto a baking tray with the duck breasts and bake them in the oven at 180 degrees until they're cooked through about 20 minutes and all that beautiful fat has come out of the skin and is pooled around the duck breasts. And then you're going to set those aside to cool, drain off the fat and keep that as well. That fat is going to go into our terrine and bring a lovely rich flavour and bind it all together. So our spice blend in the bowl, set that aside for now. And now we're going to get all of our meat in. Well, not all of it, but some of it. So the duck breast that I cooked yesterday and set aside, nice and cool. Yours doesn't have to be completely cold. It can just be sort of room temperature and that will work absolutely fine. So today I'm going to do a half recipe of this, but when you're doing a full recipe it does make quite a lot of mixture. So if you've only got 2 smaller loaf tins, make 2 smaller ones, set one aside for Boxing Day and you should be good to go. So duck breast in the bowl, 6 rashers of bacon, I'm going to do 3, cut up, pop those in there. And then I've got pork shoulder here. The most important thing you want to keep in mind is that you want to try get some pork meat without lots of sinew and without lots of fat. Trim it up as much as you can because any sinew and fat might get caught around the blades and stop it from grinding down nicely. So trim it up nicely, cut it into kind of bite-sized pieces and pop half of your pork mix in now. This allows it to grind more easily because the bowl's not overcrowded. So that goes in, we close that up, and now we're going to use the phenomenal turbo mode, 2 seconds, and we're just going to keep on turboing the mixture until it's got a nice coarse grind to all of the meat that's in there. Don't be afraid to take a look, see how you're feeling about it, and you can always go more if need be. You do want some texture in this so that you've got some nice chunks of meat in your terrine, but just make sure that as you're grinding, you're making sure there's no bits of fat or sinew caught around the blades. Just be very careful of the blades, of course. Right, and we'll do that again. That should work perfectly. We're then going to transfer our meat mixture to our bowl. So as you can see, it's got a nice coarse grind. So you're not looking for it to be minced completely, just some nice even chunks of meat spread throughout. And again, don't worry if you've got a little bit of meat or sinew stuck around your blades, just very carefully remove it. Remember not to use any other kind of spatula in your Thermomix, just the one that comes with your machine. So put our bowl back in, set the meat aside, and now we're going to just do the remainder of our pork on its own. Turbo again. And then pretty much everything else is going to go in at once. So we've got some chicken livers to add some right. Now that's going to go back into our bowl with the rest of our meat mixture, and then the most important thing that I actually forgot to mention a bit earlier was that I've had my bread soaking in milk before it started filming. So get any bread you like, white, brown, whole wheat, whatever it is you've got around the kitchen, pop it into some milk to soak before you start the rest of the recipe so that it's nice and soft and ready to go in by the time you finish the meat step. So pork's nicely browned, in it goes. Okay. And now everything else. So, bread, squeeze out any leftover milk that's in there and get that into your bowl. And then your garlic and your shallots are going to go in. A really good tip for keeping garlic once you've peeled it is just to submerge it in olive oil. So if you want to peel a whole load of garlic cloves in one go, you can do, and they won't discolor as long as you cover them in oil. You can sit out at room temperature, perfectly happy until you're ready to use them. So, soaked bread, shallots, garlic, all in together, and I think, and we're going to add our chicken livers in as well at this point. That's going to be mixed together. So the recipe says 1 second, but just take a look, see how coarsely ground you want your liver. If you want some nice big chunks of liver in there, that's up to you. I'm not the biggest offal fan, I have to admit, so if I'm going to add something like liver to a recipe like this, I will grind it down nice and fine. That's perfect. And then we're going to add in our delicious spice blend, which really does smell very Christmassy. So that's going in, along with a couple of tablespoons of our reserved duck fat from the breasts. And obviously it goes without saying that if you have any duck fat left over, it's beautiful with your roast potatoes on Christmas Day. The most important thing for crispy roasties is to heat your fat before you add in your potatoes. So get a big dollop of duck fat, goose fat, butter and oil mixed together into your baking tray in the oven until they're bubbling hot, and then toss your lightly boiled potatoes in it before going into the oven. That's how you get that crunchiness on the outside and a really soft fluffy texture on the inside. Duck fat is in. We're also going to add in our egg. It'll be 2 eggs for those of you doing a full recipe, and some ruby port, another classic festive flavour. Who's going to blame you if you have a little glass on the side while you're making this? It says a tablespoon, be generous. And at this stage we're going to season. So if you think about the amount of meat that's going into this, that's kind of how you judge how much seasoning you want. There's nothing worse than an under-seasoned terrine because it just tastes like a bland chunk of meat. So get plenty of sea salt in there and coarsely ground black pepper. Go. We're going to blitz this up and then transfer it to our bowl with our meat and mix that together. So this is pretty much the binding liquid that's going to bring everything together and help it stick together in its loaf tin to form that classic terrine shape. Right. So get your spatula. You can see we've got our coarsely ground meat, our delicious pureed liver and other delights, and those are all going to be mixed together. This might not look particularly appealing at this stage, but I promise that once we're done, it will be delicious. Now I'm going to show you a pro tip for lining your loaf tin for any kind of terrine. Even if you were doing something like a smoked salmon and cream cheese, cold terrine that just needs to set in the fridge, this method works perfectly. It gets rid of all the apprehension of having to upturn a loaf tin and get out whatever's in there in one piece, which for me is incredibly nerve-wracking. So, what I've got ready, my 6 strips of bacon that we have left over, loaf tin, and now get some cling film. Okay, most importantly, you want heavy-duty cling film for this. You don't want something too light because it won't necessarily melt in the oven, but it will get all sticky, stuck onto whatever's in your loaf tin. So you also want to make sure that you get all of the air bubbles out of this. So just use the flat of your palm to move these things out the way. Maybe you can see a bit better. Flatten that out. You do one layer and then another layer slightly higher up, like that. And flatten that out. Okay, so now you've got a lovely flat sheet of cling film. Get your loaf tin, pick that up nice and carefully, pop your loaf tin underneath, and press it down. I'll hold this up and show you in just a second exactly how carefully I'm pressing this in there. You want this little skirt hanging over the end for now, so like that. Carefully tucked into all the corners. While the terrine is cooking, you might get some liquid oozing out of the meat. That's absolutely fine. It'll gather around the cling film in the tin and you can just drain that off. So don't be worried if you do see that happening. So, lined nicely. Now we've got our strips of bacon and we're going to pop them in one by one, press them into the sides and up the sides of the loaf tin, like that. And we're just going to do those all the way across. You could use pancetta for this, but smoked streaky bacon is my personal favorite. It just brings so much flavor and the fat kind of melts into the rest of the meat beautifully. Go. I'll hold this up and show you the finished product in just a second. And in this way, all that you need to do when it comes out the oven is take hold of your excess cling film and lift it straight out and onto your serving platter. Okay, so voila, bacon lined beautifully in your tin. Make sure it presses up the sides because you're not holding it up to show on camera. You shouldn't have this problem. And now our meat mixture goes straight into the loaf tin. So as I said, this does make a lot of mixture. So if you do have 2 loaf tins, you could make 2 terrines. This freezes beautifully, so you can freeze it before or after cooking. So I'm putting in about half of my mixture, maybe 3/4, generous. Pressing that down nice and flat with my spatula. Don't be too pedantic about it, just get an even amount spread across the whole tin. And now, more festive flavors, cranberries and roughly chopped pistachios. Sprinkle those across, get your pistachios. So when you cut into this terrine, you'll get a beautiful kind of dappled effect of the lovely red cranberries and the green pistachios in the middle. So topping that off with the rest of our mixture, and just spreading that out evenly. And then we're going to flip out our little cling film skirts around the edge of the tin. seal everything in nice and tightly. Give it a nice press down. If you wanted to get a perfectly even shape, you could set this overnight in the fridge with something really heavy resting on top of it to really make it nice and compact, but that's actually perfect for our purposes. Now, would you grab the kettle from the back? So, nice roasting tin, pop that inside, grab your tin foil, and you're just going to make pretty much a cute little pat to keep it safe while it bakes. Pop that on, tuck up the edges, keep all those delicious juices and flavors locked in. And now, whenever you have to use a water bath or bain-marie, really good tip is to take it as is without the water in it, water's boiled somewhere else to the side, put it into your oven, and once it's in the oven on the shelf, pull it out and pour your water in there, because otherwise, if you fill it up here and then have to carry it to your oven, there's a good chance it's going to splosh all over the place. So I'm going to head over to my oven. Nikki's scuttling around the back with my kettle, thank you very much. So I'm going to pour that. You want it to come up about halfway up the side of your loaf tin. And my oven is preheated to 140 degrees. This is a nice gentle cooking. It's not a steaming hot bath, it's a nice gentle bath for your terrine. And that's going to cook in there for about an hour or 2 hours, but we'll check it at an hour and see how we go on. And if you want to, you can take the tin foil off and open up the cling film and brown the top for about 10 minutes, but obviously not too long because we don't want that cling film to melt. Right, moving on to our our pear and goat's cheese parcels. I have some that I made earlier, so I'll show you the finished product towards the end, but I'll just go through the basic steps with you for now. So, set that aside for the moment. Get our clean mixing bowl out. Okay, so these parcels are one of my favorite starters for Christmas because they are incredibly versatile. Another thing that you might have kicking around your fridge this time of year, I know I do, is a million kinds of cheese. And I always have a little bit of Stilton, a little bit of goat's cheese, whatever it is, can be used for this delicious recipe. So we're first going to make our little crumb. So we've got pear, rosemary, honey. Can I have that chopping board and knife, Nikki? A lemon and some walnuts. Now, I'm sure you can already spot how versatile this could be. If you don't have pears, you could use apples, any kind of stone fruit you might have around. And if you don't have walnuts, almonds, macadamia nuts, anything really would work really well here as well. Herbs, I've got rosemary, you could use thyme, that would work beautifully. Honey is a kind of staple that you do definitely need for this. And you will need some baking paper, because we're going to make adorable little parcels filled with cheesy, melty goodness. And all you need to do is cut them into little squares like this. Any kind of parchment paper will do. Cut 4 squares like this, have those ready to go, and some string. Butcher's twine is perfect for this. 4 lengths of string, just like that. So have those set aside and ready to go. And we'll start with prepping our pear. So you might have one of those fancy coring utensils, in which case go for that. But for me, just a nice sharp knife will do the trick. I'm going to pour my pear. And then this is really however you want to do it. If you wanted to cube it, that would be fine. This is probably the one thing I wouldn't recommend doing the day before, because pear does oxidize, so it will discolor if you try to cut it the day before, unless you sit it in some acidulated water overnight. So just a bowl of water, squeeze of lemon juice, and they'll stay nice and white. So I'm just going to cut these into lovely thin slices. Set that aside. So you could do this however you wanted to. I'm going for a kind of fan shape with these, but nothing too fancy. Probably on Christmas Day are going to have a lot going on. The last thing you want to be doing is perfectly slicing fruit. So however works for you. There we go. So now I've got my pear ready to go. And now we're going to do our filling. So goat's cheese, any goat's cheese you want. I've got one of these lovely soft little lugs of goat's cheese, but you could also use the bigger ones with the rind, and the rind is edible, so if you cut that into nice thick rounds, that would work beautifully for you to build everything else on top of it. I'm going to use this. So first and foremost, rosemary leaves only going into our bowl. So as I said, thyme would also be a lovely substitute here. It goes beautifully with goat's cheese. So rosemary in, and our walnuts go in. And we're going to chop those for 2 seconds on speed 8. If I can find my mixing bowl lid. So 2 seconds, speed 8. And then we're going to remove 2 teaspoons of that, because that will be our garnish at the very end. So it's a lovely, nice, finely ground mix. Still got a few intact rosemary leaves in there, which I like. So that's staying in there. And now we're going to get our honey in. There's always something so luxurious about honey. And olive oil, equal amounts of both. Okay. And this is going to be mixed for 5 seconds on speed 3. Okay, now our parcels. I'm just going to assemble one for you to see how it goes. Goat's cheese. Cut some nice thick wedges. I'm going to do 2 per parcel. You could do 3. You can make these as big or as small as you want. You could even do 1 giant goat's cheese and pear parcel, or Stilton and peach parcel, whatever it turns out to be. Okay, so we've got pears, we've got our cheese, beautifully mixed together. And now we're going to take this gorgeous honey, walnut, rosemary mix, and that is going to be drizzled over the top very generously, rather dolloped over the top, like so. Very scared of dropping this. And now grab your piece of string. This requires a little bit of maneuvering, but isn't too difficult. You're going to bring up all the various corners of your parcel together. This does not need to look pretty. It's going to be unwrapped on the plate and enjoyed with relish. No one's going to care about your knot tying skills. So round. You do just want to make sure that it's quite tight. That's the important thing. So just like that, you tie a bow, you just tie a double knot. Voila. You're going to pop those into your aroma tray, 500 mils of water in your bowl, and steam them for 20 minutes for aroma speed 1. And I have the finished product here, which Nikki and I are going to sample. Voila! I can already feel how cheesy and oozy these are. I've got my garnish, and my finished terrine. Looks beautiful. So as I said, I'd recommend slicing this up and serving it crushed onto some sourdough with some red onion chutney. That would be beautiful. Nikki and I now have a little feast ready to go. Lucky us. Unwrap our beautiful little Christmas parcels. This is like the gift that keeps on giving. Melted cheese, honey, walnuts, pears. Ooh, I'm going to try hold this up for you, but I hope you can see. Shall we, Nikki? Got some forks for us. Let's see. Get a bit of pear on there, a bit of the cheese. And we forgot the garnish. I think we have to take another bite because we forgot the garnish. I would. Beautiful. Really lovely, quite light, so you won't be over full by the time the turkey comes out.
Really subtle hint of rosemary comes through, the honey for the sweetness.
It does, doesn't it? It's lovely.
Beautiful.
Thank you. And those are our Sumptuous Starters. I hope you make them and enjoy them as much as we have. I first wanted to speak a bit about our charities before we head off that we're supporting with this initiative. We've got 4 wonderful charities that we're supporting through our festive season, and those are Age UK, the Trussell Trust, RSPCA and Focus Island. Today I want to speak to you a little bit about the Trussell Trust, which is an amazing organisation that is aiming to end hunger in the UK. They want to try and phase out food banks, or make food banks redundant essentially, by making sure that no one in the UK goes hungry this festive season or ever. So if you can, please do a little donation towards their amazing work. You can follow the links on our Instagram posts or underneath this video, and do your bit to make someone else's Christmas as festive as ours is going to be. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next week.